to introduce our speaker for this lecture, which is Ms. Şirin Pancaroğlu.
Yes, Pancaroğlu, yes.
Let's give her a warm applause first.
Thank you.
So Ms. Şirin is actually a classical harpist, and she graduated from Geneva Conservatory and also Indiana University Jacob School of Music, where I also went to school. We are actually alumni of the same school. And actually she is, however, I think the lecture today, because she is from Turkey, so her expertise and also she is really active at the RIM, which you all enjoyed her playing last night, I believe, right? So together with our other Chinese musicians. So she actually she will be sharing on the Turkish Harp. So the title is here, the Çeng, an Ancient Harp Reborn from its ashes. So with no further delay, please join me and welcome Ms. Şirin for her sharing. Thank you.
Nice to be here. Thank you. So you think you need microphone? Can you hear me if I speak this much? Yeah. I have a small voice, so just in case, maybe I can use this. It's better. Yes. Okay. So it was originally announced that it would be a workshop, but actually it was a lecture. So, but I hope to have a workshop one day. But for having a workshop, we need many Chengs. Okay. So I'll tell you all the ups and downs about that. So. Basically, this lecture is not a musicological or on an organological topic at all, because I'm a performer and I experience life through performance, musical life through performance, okay? So some of the information you will be getting, and especially in the first part of this lecture, are things you can find if you research in books, okay? If you read about it, you can find those sources. The second part is what I did with those sources. So we will do a little bit of harp history first, harps in the ancient world, and then we'll move into about 15 years ago, and when I met the Çeng and what happened afterwards. So let's move on. Okay. Yeah. So the very first harps were introduced about 3,000 years before the Christ era. So, and they were arched. So you can clearly see that it's a piece of wood that is bent. Okay, there is no, how do you say, like, there's no pins, nothing. I mean, this is just a bent piece of a rod and with a hollow sound case, basically. And they were introduced in Mesopotamia, and quickly they made their way into Iran, the actual geography of Iran. So they're arched. About 1,000 years later, so we're now in year around 2000 before Christ era, what we call angular harps started to show on iconography. So this is again a hollow box, and this is our rod, and strings are attached, but clearly it's not arched. There is this piece of wood and this one, they interlock, okay? There's a device that makes a straight angle there. So, and again, they appear in Mesopotamia. A new type of harps. So from the very 2,600 years later, from the very first harps, so 600 AD, we see in Takibustan in Iran a rock carving. Okay, so 2,600 years later, this is a boat, okay, king's boat, possibly, And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 harp players. And they all play the same instrument, okay, which you have seen before. Here is the angular harp, okay? All of them identical, and they seem to be women. The interesting thing about this, I find, is that you would think that, you know, in modern times, when we think about harps and all the references we have to harps is like they're played by angels, and you know the instrument takes you away from, you know, the present time and space. But obviously these harps were accompanying the king on a hunting expedition. Okay, so if they were to make him dream, he wouldn't be able to hunt. I really think that this meant that he's powerful. This is a sign for his power of the king, and that maybe he takes his harpists along for courage. Okay, so which is a quite different connotation from the later connotations we have about the harp always being so idyllic, you know, and sort of angelic and all that. And this is 200 years later from the previous image we see, okay, so 800 AD. We see all of a sudden the third kind of harps that exist, where they add a pillar. So it used to be an angle. So there was a rod, soundboard, or it could be the other way around. But all of a sudden there is a pillar. And this happens, this is an iconography that we have from Scotland, actually. So all of a sudden we have the modern harp, the basis of the modern harp, which is a triangular shape where the framework is completely closed, as opposed to the images we have seen before, where this part did not exist. The sound box was in the upper part, and a completely different design. This is the court of Süleyman the Magnificent, the famous Ottoman ruler. This is from a book illustration. Well, the size of this image is tiny. You know, it's in a book, in a small book. The whole image maybe is like this tall, and this is a detail from that. So, with what we call miniature painting, where you see in Islamic culture, in all the book illustrations, you have all of a sudden illustrations about the stories being told, or, you know, depictions. So 1558, okay? Quite, remember, was 3,000 years ago, before Christ era. So now we're like 1558. And we see the Çeng here, because we call it Çeng. Again, this is missing the third part, so there's only a sound box in the upper part, a rod, a little tail that allows the instrument to be stabilized when it's played on the floor, because it is almost always played on the floor, and accompanied by other instruments, you know, little frame drum. This looks like a kemanche, and this looks like Comanche, maybe, I don't know, and maybe a kanun, and maybe a large oud or shahrud, and two dancers dancing. So this is a detail of this book illustration. So this is just to tell you that this design of angular harps really lived a long time. It's quite a miracle to understand, because it was not so difficult to complete it to a triangle, but it just remained like that for so long without any design change. The last written testimony we have of this type of harp, so this angular harp, was done by, was notated by famous travelogue, Evliya Çelebi, who wrote that in Istanbul in 1660, he only saw 10 Çeng players. So for an instrument that showed up a lot in book illustrations, and probably that's a testimony for its appeal and maybe wide use, that in 1660 there were only 10 left in Istanbul, that it shows you that maybe it had already disappeared, and there were just maybe 10 that were sort of like lying around. And he saw them actually in very sort of like the back neighborhoods of Istanbul, in sort of bad neighborhoods, where there were dancers and they were just holding the Çeng as they danced. So the instrument had already lost its status, which you had seen before, like it was accompanying kings, on hunting expeditions and whatnot. So from that time on, from this last written testimony, we have no fully surviving Çengs anywhere in the world, actually. Okay? We have parts in certain places, but where I live in Turkey, there were none. So when you take just to compare again, so this is our Çeng, and last sighting 400 years ago, and with a continuous history of over 3,000 years. And this is my harp, my Western harp, and the frame was invented only 1,200 years ago. Okay, this is a very modern instrument compared to this, actually, the design. Of course, when they were invented, there was no pedals, no mechanism, nothing like that. It's still quite recent, 150 years old, this design. But the overall structure. So I tried to do a map, but I'm not very good with PowerPoint, so I missed some things. But this is the geographical expansion of angular harps, so what we call Çeng. So it originated in Mesopotamia, so Egypt, Syria, and Iraq. Later on, Iran and Turkey, of course, Greece. In the Hellenistic period, they have also a number of harps. And then it spread into the Middle East and Central Asia. And this is the part I couldn't color, but in India, they spread to India as well. And then they went all the way to China, and another part, Japan and Korea. So this kind of angular harps were used in all of these countries, okay? No countries, dynasties or whatever you want to say, but in these places. So just a little bit about its technical specifications, because there were descriptions about how to make a Çeng. So Ibn Gaybi, who died in 1435, he wrote in his theory treatise that the sound box was 43 inches. So he gives specific measurements. That the rod is 32, and that it has about 24 to 25 strings. And it says silk or goat strings. I don't know how they manage, but obviously that's what the sources say. The body is of wood and a leather membrane. So the leather membrane is this part, okay? So this is what covers the soundboard, the sound box, basically. And you can see also on this, in this replica, it's not a replica actually, it's a prototype. So this is the leather part. No. Okay, and the design is always that for it to be a Çeng, the sound box has to be above the strings, okay? So sound box here and strings below, and there's a rod to which the strings are attached, and in the old days they used pegs, actually, like violin pegs basically to attach the strings. And it is always curved like this, and there is a further downward curl here, which is quite important, and I will explain later on why. And usually a tassel is attached also, a little decorative detail. And so it's a very pretty instrument to use in miniature painting, you know, it's dreamlike. And I think that they probably paint them even more delicately than they were structurally. I don't think that this rod can be this thin, for example. It's not possible to have so many strings. Here there are, I don't know how many strings, like, it's imaginative, you know, but that it would sustain the tension, I mean, it's just impossible. So, of course, you know, they're not looking at pictures and painting, they're just painting by imagination. So, the imagination is running very loose. And oftentimes, you know, like, the shapes are, I mean, it's almost like the instrument is even more delicate than the person who is playing it, which is quite a thing. So this is actually a personification of Venus, you know, because Venus plays the harp, okay? But Venus is Zühre in our iconography, and she also plays the harp, so the star. And you can see various sizes. So see a very small one here, and here one that's, you know, this gentleman with the mustache. He's like, he has attached it with a belt, and it is really quite large. Probably the whole thing is taller than him, because there's a little bit more going down, probably. So this is part of a parade. Probably he's just playing and walking. So let's look at the Çeng in visual arts a little bit. Of course, I mean, they did not make these for art back then. They were like everyday utensils. Huh? They're like bowls people used for eating or, you know, putting food in it. So this is 12th, 13th century Iran. And these two bowls are, I love them actually, because they tell, of course, of legends. And so on the left-hand side, it's Prince Behram Gur, the Sasani prince, and his friend Azadeh, the harpist. So let's look. So here she is, and here you see the prince, okay? They're riding a camel, because I think that Behram was, he was raised in Egypt. That's Behram Gur, yeah, I think he grew up in Egypt. Yeah. So he can ride a camel. Normally it would be a horse.
In Shahnameh, it's not a horse, not a camel.
It's not? Oh, okay. Yeah, in Shahnameh. So anyway, they're riding this. They're sitting supposedly in a sort of very intricate way on this camel together. So she's facing back, and he's hunting. And there are different stories. I'm sure you can tell. There are two versions about this story.
In fact, in Shahnameh, that year and this Isa, the same year.
The same.
I don't know why these two places. First on the top of the horse, and after saying something not good.
Yeah, and yeah. Well, there are two versions I read. Is that you see, he's on the floor here, and the camel is stepping over him. But anyway, it's again what is interesting, I think, in terms of the Çeng, is that the Çeng is played again in a hunting situation. You know, again, I think that it is something that symbolizes either power or virility. I'm not so sure about that, but you can always see the Çeng in either entertainment banquets and, you know, like scenes like that, or in hunting scenes, and I'm really fascinated by that. So again, here's the Çeng. Okay, well, we don't see the strings because they probably got erased with time, or maybe the person never made them. But it shows simultaneously two things, as you say.
So like a comic story.
Yeah.
First she's over there, and then King killed the animal, and then she
Steps.
said something not so good.
Yeah, exactly. He throws her off the camel. Yeah. So, and here a much more subtle situation. Of course, this is a more romantic banqueting scene. where he is playing the Çeng. You can see it. And she's holding a glass, and I think they're having some romantic moment together. So, which is more associated with harp. Let's look at the functions of this instrument. Where do we see them depicted mostly? They're almost always playing in ensembles, sort of court ensembles with a little percussion, a few instruments here again. You know, how it is played is really fascinating, that they obviously sat on their legs to play instruments. And I suggest you to try for a couple of minutes, you'll see what happens. But it really shows you that these instruments and the people are sort of like ancient people, because they're not chair people, they're floor people. And so you see the Çeng appear a lot in medieval and early modern court ensembles. It's usually depicted this way. Polite way. Yeah, respect, yeah. But probably they did play like that. They could. Well, I'll discuss that later when I have to learn.
Still in India, they perform this way.
Yeah. Oh, in a lot of countries in Southeast Asia, they're unable to squat and sit on legs for extended periods of time. But you know, we are more modern chair people. So for the functions, a little bit, here 16th century Ottoman sort of formal scene where I think the musicians are walking, it's like a cortege, a parade maybe, and this is a male dancer, okay? And here's the Çeng again. Again, I think it is attached maybe probably with a belt here, because it's a larger size. So we understand that when they paint them or they depict them in like public situations like that, the instrument is larger and probably has maybe more strings and has a different way of, you know, attachment to the body. And then here you see some various officials, you know, like the Ottoman court, so some Europeans and some Ottoman bureaucrats. To the right-hand side, so this is, I think, Sultan Mehmed III. So it's like early 17th century. And it's from a book called Divan-i Nadiri. It's the depiction of musical entertainment. So again here, you know, just you have some wrestlers. So the Sultan is here, and then his court ensemble is sort of soothing him with beautiful music. So always depicted in sort of courtly situations or hunting situations, and it tells us that it has always something to do with power, that it's a symbol of maybe power, of political power, or and if you are politically powerful, you dominate the past, not only present, you know. So it shows us that maybe they were not even depicted in the proper way, because they always want to show the past. Maybe the Çengs were not like that, as people played them back then, you know. But just maybe it was iconography which was like prior to that time. So a little bit about Çeng and the spirituality, because the most fascinating, one of the most fascinating parts of it, at least for me, was the spiritual references to the Çeng. And of course, we're talking about literature right now, but the Çeng is a mystical metaphor, oftentimes in Sufi culture, in mystic texts. And one of them, it's called the Book of the Çeng, Çengname. And when I found out about this text, I was completely enamored with it, because I thought, I am so lucky that, you know, in the 15th century in Turkey, people wrote a book called The Book of the Harp. I mean, I felt so privileged that I'm a harpist, because it is just amazing. I mean, it's not a poem, it's a book like this, full of poetry, and where the main role is the Çeng. The Çeng speaks, basically. So Ahmedi Dai is the author of this poem, and he establishes a number of analogies, actually. So he says that the body of the instrument, body of the Çeng, represents the human body. So it is, this is the context he places the instrument in, that the leather which covers the sound box, it represents physical beauty, our human physical beauty. The silk strings are a mediator maybe for human expression. And the pegs that we have, you know, the ones that I told you to attach the strings, it's about human consciousness. And I like that a lot too. It's a great analogy, I think, to have pegs for consciousness. So in Çengname, more images come as you read. The bent neck, and I told you that it was an important detail, that the instrument goes like, there's an elevation, okay? And maybe this is not a good example I said, but most of them, as they rise, the higher point, there's a bend. So there's a downward curl also. And this represents sort of, you know, the image of the suffering lover. And by lover, what is called is like the person who loves. It can be you love the plant, you may love God, you may love your friend. It's a very sort of, how do you say, abstract sort of love, very pure love we're talking about. So because the neck is bent, this part is bent, it's an ideal image for a suffering lover, because we are here as human beings, we're suffering lovers basically. This is the Sufi thought. And the poet dialogues with the Çeng throughout the book. And there are two voices. So the poet asks questions and the instrument answers. Okay? The Çeng has a voice and speaks. The poet reveals a number of contradictions in the instrument. Okay? So it says, well, you have, it's all in poetry, of course, but that you have one head but 1,000 souls. So one head but 1,000 souls. You're strung, so we have strings like a slave, but you're free because you can express yourself. You can read, you look like a beggar because of the bent neck, so you beg, but you stand like royalty because you rise up, you know. And it says you give happiness, but you appear to be grieving. So, you know, it's a perfect, how do you say, medium to really sort of create these analogies which are deeply embedded in mystic thought. And this instrument becomes a perfect vehicle, basically, to express these existing feelings and thoughts. This is another entertainment scene from, again, Prince Behramgur's court, 15th century. I think this is from Hamse Husrev. That's where I annotated. So maybe let's read this poem, because it's really nice. I tried to translate it because it's in ancient Turkish, and it was translated into modern English, and from there I tried to translate into Turkish for me, and then simplify the English for you a little bit. So it says, the musician sits with his instrument, playing its sweet sounds. 24 silken strings it has, each string 100,000 sounds. Made of wood, strung with silk cords, grafted with stretch leather. Keys change with woven horse's hair. So remember, it was either goat or silk hair, now it says horse hair. I can't imagine horse hair, but anyway. It sings 100 melodies in every song, with 24 notes, so 24 strings, I think, and 6 sounds. This I couldn't figure out why 6. Revealing every secret in 12 keys. I think the nice part is about the attribution he gives to this instrument for revealing secrets, you know. So it's imagination running really loose, and this instrument really prompting it. So let's come to the more, you know, we finished the historical part now. This is the information you can find, and you can have different interpretation on things, but, you know, Those are the pretty much the connotations we have about this ancient instrument. About 400 years later, so I kept looking at book illustrations. My sister is an art historian. She specializes in Iran and in Turkey, and she's a medievalist. So always running around in the house, there were so many, images to look at, books and images, and I'm always seeing a little tiny harp. So starting in the year 2000, I started looking at them. And I'm thinking, this is a harp, and I'm a Turkish harpist, and where is this harp, So it is in all Ottoman miniature paintings, and, and all neighboring countries have sources. So what is this? So I asked around. There's a musical instrument archive in Istanbul, and I asked the people. I said, well, do you know what this is? They said, well, this is a Çeng. And I said, well, do you have anything related to a Çeng? Do you have a Çeng? No, we have no Çeng. So then I asked around for a long time, for like a year. I asked everyone I could find if there was ever a Çeng, that a part of it even remained, something, nothing. So nothing in Turkey. But I found out that there was a part that remained in Japan. In a museum in Tokyo, had a couple of parts, and that they were in the process of making a reconstruction. So, and I thought, wow, Japan. So I'm looking at book illustrations, and they're like, the most recent ones are 15th, 16th century, and then it's in Japan. So I got really, really confused, actually, and it became sort of like a mysterious pursuit for me to try to see, what could I find about this instrument? And I was really curious about the sound, I have to say. I became very curious. How would an instrument like that sound? Would it have any sound potential today? Maybe it was okay back then, but how does it sound like? So it started in 2007. So after thinking for about 7 years, it's a long time to think. But when you don't find any sources, and as I said, I'm a performer. I'm not a researcher. But I realized that I had to be involved in some kind of research on maybe different levels, not so deep, but just to connect the dots and to see if I could have maybe a possibility to create a Çeng. If there was no Çeng to go around, then can we make one, So I thought, we should make a prototype. And then I should find music to play on it. I really I was very motivated by this, stimulated and motivated by texts I was reading and all that. And I had to learn, because I grew up in a completely Western classical music background. I had no idea in year 2007 about Turkish music. As a listener, I knew, but not as a performer at all. So I had to devise a project because the Çeng just doesn't pop up, and you don't go to a manufacturer, instrument maker, say, can you make a Çeng for me? They don't. Because they have an order of 1,000 ouds to make, which they can sell, whereas for my one Çeng, they have to spend hours, So it was not going to work that way. So I found myself in a situation where I thought I have to find some funding for manufacturing, but I had to tie it to a performance so that it would be of interest, and maybe a recording so that it's something that's archival, that stays, so it's not forgotten. So I kind of approached a foundation in Turkey who back then worked with, they had a symphony orchestra. They sponsored a symphony orchestra that met 3-4 times a year, and they would feature instruments, traditional instruments from around the Black Sea area. Why Black Sea? Because this foundation was attached to a big Turkish company, construction and heavy industry and whatnot, but they were operating around the Black Sea. So they had an orchestra with lots of instruments, and they would feature traditional instruments. So I thought, oh, traditional, okay, they might be interested and they have money. So because I had to pay someone to make a Çeng for me, this was like the most important part. So they liked the idea very much. I said, well, let's make a Çeng, and then we can commission maybe a composer to write something for it. Because I was always thinking, because my background is in Western classical music, I thought, and they have a symphony orchestra, well, how to get their attention was that maybe we can commission a concerto, so that their orchestra is involved, and then we make the Çeng, and then they like making recordings. So I had to kind of like tailor, my dreams to what they were doing, they were in the process of doing. So in 2008, I approached an instrument maker in Istanbul, quite well known. I said, I have some funding. Are you interested in making a Çeng? So I'm too busy. I cannot put the time aside for that. So he was at the Istanbul Technical University instrument making department. He was the chairman of the department. He said, but I have a master's student. He might be interested because we did some historical replicas the last few years. I said, oh, did you do a Çeng? No Çeng. Okay. He said, but we can handle it. So he made the Çeng you see on the left, the master's student. And it was, I have to say, we put 2 or 3 in the trash before we had one that kind of stood together, at least for a while. So, and while this was happening, the concerto had been commissioned. So for Çeng, harp, because I was too scared to play the whole concerto on the Çeng, because I didn't know what this instrument is going to turn out like. So I said, let's make a concerto for Çeng, harp, and orchestra. So while this instrument was being, designed and some of them go to trash, the concerto was advancing. It was a 33-minute work. and the deadlines were coming close. So the concert was supposed to be in a big festival in Istanbul, the Istanbul Music Festival, and it was 2008. And I was getting very, very nervous because the Çeng was not finished yet. And but finally, he gave me one, but with many, many problems on it. I mean, to the point that, for example, he used wooden pins to attach the strings, like he saw in the old models. And of course, I wouldn't know better, And every time I would tune the string, so I would like tighten the string, you could hear a crack. And if the weather was humid, it wouldn't move, okay? And sometimes it would crack and stay stuck. And I'm preparing for this concerto where I'm the soloist, and I have to play 2 movements on this instrument. And I was trying to learn how to play this instrument like on the images, with sitting on my legs. I decided I can't sit on my legs. But so I decided to cross my legs like this, sit on the floor. That was also very hard. The first times, after sitting for maybe 10 minutes, I get up and I couldn't feel my legs. And how many fingers to use, the string tension, I have nothing to look at, basically. But I quickly realized that normally it takes 8 fingers to play a modern harp, but this tiny harp cannot be played with more than 6, so 3 in each hand. So anyway, this was a very sort of difficult time, I have to say. I had almost a heart attack every day. So the concert day approaches, and finally I had the instrument maker sit in the first row with his equipment. If something broke, he could change immediately, maybe. And we had done a few more prototypes between 2008 and 2016. And finally, I had one that was structurally quite good, made by a harp maker who specialized in medieval harps. In Scotland, they love medieval harps, lap harps, small harps. So, so the one you see on the right is the one that's sitting on the piano. So basically, this is the first project I mentioned. So you can see me in the same work. So the conductor is here. I'm on this little podium. So this is the first time, Çeng is seeing an audience, basically. And on the left-hand side, there's the harp, and I go back and forth in the 5-movement concerto. So I play first movement here, second there, third, fourth I start here, and I finish there. And it was a wonderful way to start this idea, basically, because I didn't have to, I had the means to pay the master's student, and the concerto was commissioned. Everyone was happy financially as well, because if everyone is unhappy financially, you cannot even complain that the tuning pins crack. So I'll have you listen to a little bit of this. This is the movement, second movement from this concerto. And my Hasan Uçarsu, who is the composer, he likes using a lot of sort of existing traditional material in his symphonic works. And that's why I approached him, actually. And he's a really close collaborator and friend of mine. And he wrote this concerto, which he titled Uninvited Guests. And I said, what do you mean by uninvited guests? Why the title, It doesn't sound very, how do you say, welcoming, basically, when the guests are not invited. He says, well, they just pop, I said, what do you mean? He says, but look at the music, he says. I have used some existing material, old saz semai and parts of peshrev and things like that. They're just uninvited guests. They just pop into the music. So there are quotations, and then there are large sections in this work where it is this material, he reworks it, basically. So, but this is a more sort of pure moment. Uninvited guest. Okay. So this was a wonderful moment for me, actually, because finally I had a Çeng I can play on, and but it had continuing problems because of design things and material. So I approached the foundation, the same foundation. The year later, I said, let's improve on this design. Huh? Improve? I said, it's a prototype. We have to make another one, because I have some ideas now how to not use maybe wood pins, change some materials, change the material for levers and all these things. They said no, we have done our part of supporting this project, and we have a Çeng. Yeah, you think you have one, and so they I was very happy, but at the same time I was like, oh, I have to look elsewhere now to see what I can do, how I can further this project. And in the meantime, you know, I just kept going with my own work. You know, sometimes it takes me to different styles of music. So once I was collaborating with an electronic music composer, and then he said, let's work on something. And I said, well, let's work on Çeng. Let's base a work on Çeng. So we went into the studio, recording studio, and we recorded all the sounds and effects you could obtain from a Çeng, as well as a harp, and all the extended techniques as well. So we made a huge vocabulary of sound bank, basically, for over 3 days. And he had enough material to compose with. And we called it Resonating Universes. And we released the recording in UK. And I was very happy that the Çeng was also found a spot that it could be featured here. So because I keep thinking I need to find support, I need to have a better instrument, and I need to keep playing with other musicians. So I try to showcase it basically in every single part of my work. So just to give you a glimpse. These are the levers. Oh, sorry. Different world. Oh, wait. Okay. Yes. So, sorry?
This instrument is not the same.
No, it's not. It's a one in between. The first, yeah. There are two. I mean, I have played. This is the fourth Çeng I'm playing, and we have some that we discarded. Okay. Some of them fell apart also. The very first one that I played, one day structurally, it couldn't hold the tension at all. So, so anyway, the whole process was quite like a struggle, I have to say, not just to find an instrument that was good enough to play, but how to play it, you know, and I was having sometimes back problems sitting on the floor. I felt the ergonomy is not proper, the angles are not right, so you cannot play for an extended period of time, but I really liked the sound, and the response that when I include the Çeng in my work, the response that it gets from the audience also, that it is something, it creates a sound world which is not like maybe anchored in the present, but more in the past. But it's like time travel with sound. So it's a sort of musical archaeology in some way, and it's really nice to sort of play. The other thing that I really liked, and I kept playing the Çeng despite all the difficulties, is that because it is an angular harp and it's not a closed shape, the phrasing is quite different, the character of the phrasing. So when two notes in a harp cannot be connected, right? Because we don't have a possibility to make a vibrato. But on the Çeng, because it is angular, the sound production is quite different. And it is more, less rigid. It creates more a feeling of sustain. Like you can phrase something extremely beautifully on the Çeng. Unlike, you can try the same sentence on modern harp, it doesn't sound the same. So it really sort of improved my sense of phrasing in general. It educated my ear because it has some different character. So I started finding things in dealing with an instrument that's from the past, you know, way past, and not even recent past, way past. It was shaping me as a musician in some ways a little bit differently. So I was interested in different sorts of music, and it made me learn Turkish music. And that part is quite interesting also because in 2008, after I made the premiere of the harp concerto, I thought I should just keep, you know, learning with this instrument. So I should put it next to other traditional instruments, maybe. That's the only way to learn Turkish music, by just sitting and doing what we call meşk, so by performance practice. And so I ended up playing with lots of very famous people, but I was a total beginner. I was like this. I didn't know anything. I couldn't read the scores properly. I didn't know how to embellish. It took whatever ego I had built until that time completely. I was ego-free from that moment on, from a musical point of view at least. So I had to sort of endure those moments of sort of embarrassment, a lot of embarrassment actually. And I got to play with really famous people because they knew me as a harpist. So they respected me. So when we have a rehearsal and I'm like a total beginner, I'm like a baby, but they were very patient with me. So in a way, that also is a huge plus, I felt, just moving from one tradition to another without leaving what I know, and because I keep playing regular mainstream repertoire and interesting projects in that as well, but just to open a new door. It really made me develop in interesting ways. So in 2013, I recorded, finally, I thought I know enough. And with some guidance, I recorded a CD where we put the Çeng next to Turkish traditional instruments and in traditional music. And that got so much attention. It was then released in Iran as well. As you can see in the, we made a new cover for Iran, and it was released there as well. I sent this first. They said, no, it doesn't work. I said, but my head is covered. No. So we made this, which I like more, of course, now. I think it's nicer. So just a glimpse of a Peşrev and Kürdi Makam here. From Angeli, is a composer of Greek origins from Istanbul, a tambur player. This is my sort of Taksim. This CD was like some solo Çeng, but with other Turkish instruments. In every track we feature kemanche, a ney, with a singer, and tambur and oud. Yes, I'll wrap up. Then all this process, just to summarize a little bit, in about 2021, I started writing down a lot of the music that I had played until that time, because every time I was going abroad to play at a harp festival, either with the Çeng or lever harp or pedal harp, harpists were coming up to me and saying, "Oh, well, this is so nice, we'd like to play this as well." And one day, a publisher, a music publisher from UK, he said, "Well, all the harpists are asking now for this score, and so do you have it?" I said, "Yeah, but I have it, but they cannot play from that. You know, it's already, you have to transpose at sight, because Turkish music, you know, it looks one way, you play it somewhere else." So I said, said, "Just give it to us." I said, no, I will not give you this. I will properly write this. And little by little, I started writing down music for harpists. And so finally, I published in 2022 a collection of 24 books, and one of them introduced makam and usul for harpists. So it has lots of little pieces, studies, composed and progressive, like a method for Turkish music for harpists. And then I started doing also tunes book, and I brought some of the music. You want to look at it. It took me a while to know how to explain sometimes microtonal tuning, because it involves also microtones. I didn't use only makams, which are made of whole and half tones. So, and it's been a very interesting process to have published this, because now people can use these sources, and they play in competitions and their concerts, and it's really made me come close to the harp community. And just to finish on some challenges, and I want to read something from Professor Bo Labergren, who is a specialist of harps in the ancient world. He is the one who wrote the Ancient Harp column in the New Grove Dictionary. He's a physicist, but sound physicist basically, but he's specialized in ancient harps from a research point of view. And so he says in the beginning of this article, and I have to say, when I showed him my Çeng, he said, "Why did you put levers?" So I have levers for half tones. I said, I play music for today. You know, I want to play half tones and whole tones. He says, "But the harps were not like that back then. They didn't have levers." I'm just a performer today. But I admire him a lot. So this is what he says. In 2004, I visited Japan for an international conference in musical acoustics in Nara. A dozen years earlier, Professor Shigeo Kishibe had told me that Professor Toshiro Kido, director of the National Theatre in Tokyo, had commissioned reconstructions of the angular harps in the Shosoin repository in Nara. This time I was pleased to meet people involved in the reconstructions. They have taken note of the uniqueness of the surviving harps and made fully functioning replicas. Later, I learned that scholars in Korea also were making replicas. Perhaps one day, all regions that once had angular harps will rediscover it. My inner eye saw a congress of angular harps from Japan, Korea, China, Central Asia, Iran, Iraq, India, Syria, Lebanon, Greece, and Egypt. He forgot Turkey. They discussed repertoire. This is his imagining, so a harp congress of angular harps. They discussed repertoire, playing technique, and the latest discoveries by scholars. I sobered up. He thinks this is something impossible to make, and I think that it is something that's possible to make, and I would really sort of like take this moment to suggest it in front of all of you that, you know, maybe we can do this. I don't know what is the best location to do that, but I think that maybe China is a good place to do it, I think. So we can, you know, accumulate and put together information from Çeng research, and manufacturing, which is a major issue, because Professor Lavergrand, when he showed me the Çeng that he was involved in manufacturing, it didn't have any leather. I said, but you complain about my levers, but you don't have leather. So, you know, we need sort of scholarly work and research. So, you know, that's one challenge, and the biggest one I face doing work, because I plan to continue with the Çeng, because it just brought so much happiness to me and so much knowledge, which I wouldn't have encountered if I just kept on track with my only Western side. And, you know, in Turkey we consider ourselves to be a country bridging, you know, different continents. And I really felt like I found my whole identity with the Çeng. It really completed me. So thank you very much.
So, time is really limited. I just wonder if we take one or two questions. Any questions from you?
Yes.
I think your final suggestion about producing it in China is a good idea. There are several instrument makers, very big quantity instrument makers in China, and we know some of them. Many different instruments, including Chinese and Western instruments.
Chinese traditional.
Hongho, yeah,
Yes.
very similar to this. So if you're interested, you can come to Beijing, especially Beijing, and we can introduce you to the producer. Maybe you can talk about producing.
It would be very nice. Yeah, yeah. It has to be someone who is who wants to do research as well. You know, an instrument maker who wants to do research.
Especially people.
People. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's nice. Thank you. Thanks.
Any more questions? And if you have other questions, or if you would like to have a close look of
yeah, take a look at the Çeng. Feel free.
and also publications of the methods and scores, you're welcome to come. And anyways, we will have a lunch break until like 1:30. We have the next section. Thank you again.